Red Dead Redemption began development in 2005. A joint project between all the studios under Rockstar Games, Redemption was led by Rockstar San Diego. Created to be a next-generation console game, Red Dead Redemption used the Rockstar Advanced Game Engine, or RAGE, same as the upcoming Grand Theft Auto 4. RAGE had been built in-house at San Diego. The first Rockstar game to employ it was little more than one long engine demo, the table tennis sim, Rockstar Games Presents Table Tennis. The table tennis game was a sign of Rockstar's desire to expand beyond the narrow framework of GTA. RAGE grounded upcoming releases for the publisher like GTA 4 and Midnight Club Los Angeles, also developed by Rockstar San Diego, in realistic physics, and gave them not only good graphics, but atmospherics. In Midnight Club LA, for example, RAGE was used to inject sim elements into the street racing. This included weather, which impacted road conditions, not to mention traffic that would realistically work off the day-night cycle. At the same time as table tennis and MCLA, Rockstar collaborated with the Australian company Team Bondi to produce 2011's LA Noire. This game used boutique studio tools and state-of-the-art facial capture that set the industry on fire. In all of their projects during the late 2000s, Rockstar were becoming more well-rounded, cinematic, and adventurous. And perhaps the culmination of all of this was Red Dead Redemption. Developed internationally by a staff of over 800, Redemption, with its price tag between $80 to $100 million, was reportedly one of the most expensive video games ever produced. Red Dead Redemption is set in 1911, famously known as the Year of the Gun. John Browning's Colt 45, the M1911, took its name from the year, when it first became standard issue for all members of the U.S. Armed Forces. It would remain so until 1986. As this might suggest, Red Dead Redemption is about the birth of the 20th century. You play as an aging former outlaw named John Marston. Opening in the burgeoning little prairie town Blackwater, Red Dead Redemption would take players all over the southern US and into a Mexico gripped by the chaos of revolution. As John Marston, you must navigate a rapidly changing world that you barely recognize to hunt down the last living members of your own former gang. This, your government bosses insist, is the only way you and your family will be allowed to live in peace. Designer and writer Christian Cantamessa in 2010 said that contrary to the myth of the West setting of the late 19th century, so popular in classic westerns, Redemption, as a so-called revisionist Western, concerned itself instead with the death of the West. Revisionist Westerns came of age in the New Hollywood school of the early 70s. They set out to challenge the standards of the genre, which typically portrayed the early history of the modern US as a triumph of civilization against the forces of savagery. In the late 60s, classic Western icon John Wayne infamously wrote, "If everything isn't black and white, I say why the hell not?" As the quote suggests, classic Westerns were about, arguably, the natural order of things and of men. Whether the conflict was against savage heathens or the outlaw, or just the wild landscape, classic Westerns were stories of how things went from uncivilized to civil, wild to tame, black to white. Westerns as a classic genre of American film were in effect origin stories for American society. Revisionist Westerns, on the other hand, that Red Dead Redemption would draw from, were like Sam Pekinpah's 1969 film, The Wild Bunch. In these kinds of Wild West stories, the brute moral simplicity of John Wayne was completely defied. They depicted a morally gray universe wherein savagery became civility by simply becoming more refined and hypocritical. Revisionist Westerns made the underlying power dynamics and sociopolitical baggage of the American Western format manifest, and The Wild Bunch doubled as a commentary for the Vietnam age. Set in 1913, The Wild Bunch is about an old band of six guns in Texas living out the death of the West. During one last score for the Pike Bishop Gang, a posse of bounty hunters, led by one of their own former comrade, Deke Thornton, who's being forced by the US government to track them down, ambushes in the middle of the robbery. Many of their crew, along with scores of bystanders, are killed, and when the stolen goods are proven counterfeit, the whole debacle takes on a real sense of meaninglessness. The handful of outlaws left in Pike's gang decamp for a place where the spirit of the frontier surely lived on, Mexico. But they're quickly disillusioned here, as they're drawn into the ongoing civil war. Forced by circumstance into the service of the dictatorial General Mapache of the Mexican Federales, when a series of double crosses lead to the murder of one of their gang right in front of them, the Wild Bunch decide to go out with their guns blazing. All are either killed or wounded in a suicidal, spur-of-the-moment shootout with the Mexican army. Quote, "The point of the film is to take this facade of movie violence and then twist it so it's not fun anymore. Just a wave of sickness in the gut. It's not fun and games and cowboys and Indians, it's a terrible, ugly thing. And yet there's a certain response that you get from the savagery and excitement because we're all violent people." End quote. According to a 1994 book on the Wild Bunch, Pekinpah did not consider his use of violence a success. Rather than the heady mix of enjoyment and stomach-churning alienation that he envisioned from the film, reactions were either one or the other, all positive or all negative. The John Wayne absolutism had failed to be dislodged by the Wild Bunch. I argue this is what Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption tried to ameliorate. The Wild Bunch would inform virtually everything about Rockstar's next-gen open-world Western in 2010. But the major addition that would finally bring Pekinpah's idealized relation to violence across was interactivity. John Marston is more or less the Wild Bunch's Deke Thornton, but instead of jail time, what's at stake are the lives of Jack and Abigail, Marston's son and wife. The moral relativism inherent to the revisionist Western genre is manifest in the switch from hunted to hunter, outlaws to lawman, the Wild Bunch to Red Dead Redemption. But it's also more accurate. During frontier times, it was not moral purity that made the difference between badges and bandanas, but rather less high-minded practical necessity. Legends of the prairies and plains were often US marshals or sheriffs and wanted murderers at the same time. In reality, a thin line divided the Wild Bills of the world from the so-called savages and outlaws that they brutally killed. It's so far away. The same holds true of John Marston and the Pike Bishop-esque Wild Bunch of Dutch Vanderlyn, the last living members of which you're tasked with hunting down. Red Dead Redemption bases much if not most of its story, themes, characters, and setting on the Wild Bunch. Like the Wild Bunch, Red Dead Redemption is about betrayal. And as the name hints at, there is no going back, no erasing the past. Regardless of why we did it, what we do is done forever. In the Christian faith, redemption is available only by proxy of sacrificial blood. The question Red Dead Redemption leaves players to ponder ultimately is whether even sacrifice is truly enough to erase the consequences of our actions. All in all, from story to gameplay, Red Dead Redemption was an excellent game. But Rockstar would return to the franchise and arguably perfect it with 2018's Red Dead Redemption 2.